The silence in Buckingham Palace was sacred. For 127 years, the royal guards had stood their posts without speaking, without flinching, without breaking their oath of silent duty. But on a warm July afternoon, one American politician would test that silence in ways no one expected. Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood 15 feet from guard James Sullivan, her phone camera recording, a smile playing at her lips. She was in London for an international climate summit, taking a day for tourism like thousands before her. But what happened next would become the most viral moment of her career. "Hello?" She waved at James. "Excuse me, sir. Can you hear me?" James stood perfectly still. Red uniform pressed and immaculate. Black bearskin hat, tall and proud. Eyes fixed forward. Not a muscle moved. AOC laughed, the sound echoing off the palace stones. "This is wild. They really don't talk. Like at all." She spoke to her phone, to her millions of followers watching live. "I've seen videos, but this is actually kind of sad. Imagine standing here all day, not allowed to be human." Before we continue, if stories like this fascinate you, hit that subscribe button. Real moments that challenge what we think we know don't come around often. You won't want to miss what happens next. James had served for 8 years. 8 years of tourists taking photos. 8 years of children making faces at him. 8 years of people trying to make him laugh, flinch, or break protocol. He'd endured it all with dignity. But something about this felt different. "It's actually dehumanizing when you think about it," AOC continued, circling slightly, still filming. "Making someone stand like a statue. We wouldn't treat workers this way in America." Well, some people would, but we're fighting to change that. A small crowd gathered. Other tourists pulled out phones. Palace visitors stopped to watch. The American politician versus the silent guard. Entertainment. "Can you at least blink?" She stepped closer. "Do they let you blink? Or is that against the rules too?" James blinked. Once, slow and deliberate. He blinks. AOC turned to her camera. "So there's a human in there. That's something, I guess." What she didn't know, what the growing crowd didn't know, was that James Sullivan wasn't just any guard. Before joining the Queen's Guard, he'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He'd carried wounded soldiers through gunfire. He'd held dying friends in his arms. He'd seen things that would break most people. Standing silent at a palace gate wasn't suffering, it was peace. This is what I mean about performative tradition. AOC's voice took on a more serious tone, her politician voice. We preserve these pageants while real people struggle. This man could be doing meaningful work. Instead, he's a prop for tourists. A prop. The word hung in the air like smoke. James's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Barely visible. But it was there. "I bet you have thoughts." AOC moved closer still, now only 5 feet away. "I bet you have opinions about health care, climate change, workers' rights. But you can't share them. You're just supposed to stand there and be decorative." Decorative. 8 years of service. 2 tours in combat. A medal for valor tucked away in his flat. Decorative. The crowd had grown to maybe 30 people now. All watching. All filming. This was going viral in real time. "You know what?" AOC addressed her phone directly. "I'm going to stand here with him. In solidarity, show what it's like to be silenced." She positioned herself beside James, mimicking his stance. Feet together. Hands at her sides. She lasted maybe 15 seconds before shifting her weight. "Okay, this is actually harder than it looks. My back is all ready." She broke stance, laughing. "How do you do this for hours?" James said nothing. But his eyes, those eyes that had seen combat, loss, brotherhood, sacrifice, flickered. Just for a moment. Not toward her, but forward. Always forward. "The thing is," AOC continued, back to addressing her audience, "silence can be a form of oppression. When we force people into roles where they can't speak their truth, can't express their humanity, we participate in systems that permission to speak." "Ma'am." The words cut through her sentence like a blade. through silk for words. Quiet, measured. But with the weight of mountains behind them, the crowd gasped. Phones lifted higher. This wasn't supposed to happen. Guards don't speak. Ever. AOC froze mid-gesture, her expression shifting from confidence to surprise. I what? James still faced forward, still stood at attention, but his voice, when it came again, carried across the courtyard with crystal clarity. Permission to speak, ma'am, he repeated. You've raised concerns about my humanity. I'd like to address them. AOC lowered her phone slightly. The smile had vanished from her face. Round them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing something unprecedented was unfolding. You're allowed to do that? She asked. No, ma'am. James's voice remained steady. I'll likely face disciplinary action. But you've made this about my humanity, so let me be human for 47 seconds. 47 seconds. Specific. Intentional. I didn't mean to. AOC started. You called me a prop, James interrupted gently. Decorative. You suggested I'm being oppressed by standing at this post. With respect, ma'am, you don't know what oppression looks like. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the traffic noise from the street seemed to fade. I volunteered for this position, James continued. After serving in Afghanistan, after watching friends die for values they believed in, I chose to stand here. Not because I'm voiceless, because this uniform represents something bigger than me. AOC opened her mouth, closed it. For once she was listening. You see silence and assume suffering, James said. I see silence and remember a medic named Thomas who went quiet during an ambush. Died saving 3 of us. His silence wasn't oppression. It was sacrifice. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes. Every tourist who passes, every child who waves. Every person who takes a photo, they're not seeing a prop. They're seeing continuity. History. Something stable in an unstable world. James's voice never rose, never became aggressive, just steady truth. I stand here by choice, representing a crown that has weathered centuries. You stand in politics by choice, representing constituents you believe in. Neither of us is oppressed. We're both serving. AOC's phone hung loose in her hand now, the live stream still running, millions watching. But here's the difference, James continued, and now his voice carried an edge, not anger. Something deeper. I don't mock your service. I don't film you and call your work performative. I don't reduce your complexity to a soundbite. The words landed like physical blows. Measured, precise. True, you spoke about workers' rights. Ma'am, I have excellent health care. Fair wages, retirement benefits, time with my family. I work hard, yes, but I work with purpose. That's not oppression. It's employment with dignity. A man in the crowd started clapping. Others joined. The applause grew. James remained still. You have 37 seconds left on my humanity timer. Use them wisely. AOC's face had gone through several shades of emotion. Surprise, discomfort, now something else. Maybe respect. Maybe embarrassment. I apologize, she said quietly. You're right, I made assumptions. Everyone makes assumptions, James replied. The question is whether we learn from being corrected. You've built a career on speaking for those without voices. Admirable, but sometimes the silent have more to say than we imagine. 20 seconds left. My grandfather stood at this same post in 1967. My father in 1989, when I put on this uniform. I carry them with me. Every guard here carries generations of service. We're not props, we're legacy. 10 seconds, you asked. If I have thoughts on healthcare, climate, workers' rights, I do. Complex thoughts. Educated thoughts. I read your Green New Deal proposal. It's interesting ideas, some impractical, but born from genuine concern. See, I'm human. I just choose when to speak. 5 seconds. My silence isn't your enemy, Congresswoman. Assuming you know someone's story without asking, that's the real oppression. James stopped talking. Exactly 47 seconds. He'd timed it perfectly. Then he returned to his stance. Eyes forward, back straight. Silent once more. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, a few whistles, phones everywhere, capturing the moment. AOC stood frozen, her live stream still broadcasting her stunned expression to millions. She looked at James, at the crowd, back at James. "Thank you," she finally said. "Genuinely. Thank you for that." James gave no indication he heard. He was silent again. The moment had passed, but AOC didn't move. She ended her live stream, pocketed her phone, and just stood there, thinking. Processing. A palace official appeared, a stern-looking woman in a dark suit. She approached James with a tablet in hand, clearly ready to document his breach of protocol. "Officer Sullivan," she began. "I know, ma'am," James said quietly. "I accept full responsibility." The official paused, looking between James and AOC. The entire exchange was recorded. "It's already viral. The palace will need to respond. I understand." AOC stepped forward. "Excuse me, this was my fault. I provoked him. There are consequences. I'll speak on his behalf." The official's eyebrow raised. "That won't be necessary, Congresswoman." "But I insist what will be necessary," the official interrupted, allowing a small smile, "is managing the press response. Because Officer Sullivan just became the most famous guard in the Commonwealth." She pulled up her tablet, showing a Twitter feed. The video had 2.3 million views, and climbing. Every major news outlet was picking it up. Royal Guard destroys AOC with powerful response. Silent no more. Palace Guard's viral truth-telling. AOC humbled by Royal Guard's 47-second speech. The headlines scrolled endlessly. Within 3 hours, the video had 15 million views. By evening, it had crossed 50 million. The internet had found its moment, and opinions exploded across every platform. James was escorted inside the palace for a formal review. Standard procedure for any breach of protocol. He walked through corridors he'd guarded 1,000 times, now seeing them from a different perspective. As someone who'd broken the rules, the review room was oak-paneled and serious. 3 senior officers sat behind a long table. James stood at attention, waiting. Officer Sullivan, the center officer, Commander Patricia Walsh, spoke first. "In 8 years of service, you've had a spotless record. Until today?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why break that record now?" For a politician's comments, James considered his answer carefully. "Because she wasn't wrong to question, ma'am. She was wrong in how she questioned. And someone needed to show her the difference." Commander Walsh studied him. "You understand that our silence is tactical. It maintains mystique, tradition, and discipline." "I do, ma'am." "And yet you spoke." "I did, ma'am." Silence filled the room. James kept his eyes forward, ready to accept whatever consequences came. "The palace switchboard has received over 3,000 calls," another officer said, reading from a tablet. 92% positive. Messages from veterans, active military, service workers worldwide. They're calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero, sir. I just spoke truth," Commander Walsh repeated. "A dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. But in yours, today it may have done more good than harm." She stood, walking around the table. "Officer Sullivan, the Crown recognizes that extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary responses. Your words reflected well on this institution. They showed dignity, intelligence, and restraint." James felt something loosen in his chest. However, Walsh continued, "We cannot have guards speaking whenever they feel justified. It breaks down the entire system." "I understand, ma'am." "Therefore, you're being reassigned. Effective tomorrow, you'll join the Royal Protection Command. Your new role will involve direct interaction with visitors, educational outreach, and representing the Guard in public forums." James blinked. "Ma'am?" "We're promoting you," Walsh smiled. "Apparently you're good at speaking when it matters. Let's make that your job." Outside the palace, AOC sat in her hotel room, watching the video replay for the 20th time. Her chief of staff, Maya, paced nearby. "This is everywhere," Maya said. "Fox News is running it on loop. CNN wants an interview. Even international outlets are calling it a defining moment." "It was," AOC said quietly, "just not the way I planned." "Do we push back? Frame it differently?" "No." AOC closed her laptop. He was right. I did exactly what I criticize others for. Made assumptions without understanding. Talked instead of listening. Maya stopped pacing. You're taking this seriously. I embarrassed myself on a world stage. But worse, I disrespected someone who deserved better. Yes, I'm taking it seriously. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then saw the country code UK. Hello? Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. This is Commander Patricia Walsh from Buckingham Palace. I'm calling about Officer Sullivan. AOC sat up straighter. Is he in trouble? Because I'll do whatever he's being promoted, Walsh interrupted. But he's asked to speak with you. Would you be available to return to the palace tomorrow morning? He wants to talk to me? He says you both started something today that's worth finishing properly. The next morning, AOC arrived at the palace at 9 a.m. No press. No cameras. Just her and Maya led through private corridors to a small meeting room. James waited there, out of uniform, wearing a simple suit. He stood when she entered. Congresswoman, thank you for coming. Should be apologizing to you, AOC said immediately. What I did was human, James interrupted gently. You made a mistake. We all do. But you've handled it with grace. That matters. They sat across from each other, two people from completely different worlds, finding unexpected common ground. I've been reading your work, James said. Your policies, your speeches. You care deeply about working people. That's admirable. I just learned I need to include all working people in that, AOC replied. Including royal guards. Including everyone, James agreed. That's the trap we all fall into. Assuming we know whose struggle is valid, whose work has meaning. Truth is, everyone's fighting battles we can't see.
AOC
leaned forward. Teach me. What did I miss? And so James talked. About choosing this life. About what service means to him. About the guards who stand silent, not because they're forced to, but because they've chosen to be part of something larger than themselves. We live in a noisy world, James explained. Everyone shouting, demanding attention, fighting to be heard. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful statement. It says I don't need your validation. I know my worth. But silence can also hide injustice, AOC countered. True, which is why knowing when to speak is an art. I stood silent for 8 years. I spoke for 47 seconds. Both were choices. Both had meaning. They talked for 2 hours? About politics, service, sacrifice, and purpose. About the difference between performance and substance. About how easy it is to talk and how hard it is to listen. When they finally left the meeting room, something had shifted. Not friendship exactly, but mutual respect. Understanding. Will you do a joint interview? AOC asked as they walked. I think people need to see this conversation. James considered. Only if it's substantive. Not a publicity stunt. Real dialogue about service, duty, and what it means to stand for something. Agreed. They scheduled it for the following week. A long-form interview with the BBC. No sound bites. No gotcha questions. Just two people from different worlds finding common ground. The internet, meanwhile, had moved into its next phase. Analysis, videos, commentary pieces, think pieces about tradition versus progress, silence versus voice, respect versus mockery. But something else was happening too. Something unexpected. Veterans started sharing their stories. Service workers from around the world posted videos about choosing their roles, about pride in work others might see as mundane. Teachers, nurses, janitors, drivers all talking about dignity in service. James's 47 seconds had opened something. A conversation about what it means to work with purpose. Regardless of how glamorous that work appears, at home in his London flat, James read some of the messages. Thousands of them. From Afghanistan, veterans who understood his journey. From palace guards in other countries who felt seen. From people who'd never served a day, but suddenly understood why some might choose to. One message stood out. From a young man in Manchester, I'm 19, was going to drop out of university, felt like nothing mattered. Then I watched your video. The way you talked about choosing to serve, about silence being powerful, about purpose, it made me reconsider. I'm staying in school. I'm going to find my own way to serve. Thank you for showing that dignity comes from within, not from others' opinions. James stared at that message for a long time. He'd never intended to inspire anyone. He'd just wanted to correct a misunderstanding. But impact doesn't care about intention. The BBC. Interview aired on a Thursday evening. Prime time. Over 12 million viewers tuned in. Massive numbers for a serious discussion. The interviewer, David Preston, was known for tough questions. He didn't disappoint. Officer Sullivan, some say you embarrassed a sitting U.S. Congresswoman. Was that your intent? No, James replied calmly. My intent was to correct a narrative that reduced my service to performance art. Embarrassment was a side effect. It's not the goal. But you did embarrass her. Gee. If that felt like embarrassment, perhaps the assumptions were worth examining. Preston turned to AOC. Congresswoman, you've built a career on speaking truth to power. How did it feel to have someone speak truth to you? AOC smiled, but it was genuine, not defensive. Humbling. Necessary. I've talked about the importance of listening to workers. James taught me I wasn't listening to all workers. Just the ones whose struggles fit my narrative. That's a significant admission. Should be normal, AOC replied. We should all be willing to learn, adjust, grow. The problem with politics today is everyone's so afraid of admitting mistakes that we never actually learn from them. Tanya leaned forward. Let's talk about what this moment revealed. Officer Sullivan, you spoke about silence being a choice. But isn't silence also used to suppress dissent? How do we know when silence is power and when it's oppression? James nodded. That's the crucial question. Silence under force is oppression. Silence by choice is power. The difference is agency. I chose this role. I can leave any time. That's not oppression. But what about people who feel they have no choice? Who stay silent because speaking up means losing their job, their security? That's different, James agreed. And that's where people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez become vital, giving voice to those who fear speaking up. My silence is my strength. Their silence is their fear. Understanding the difference requires listening, not assuming. AOC jumped in, and that's what I failed to do. I saw silence and assumed oppression without asking why. James's right, agency is everything. He has it. Many workers don't. My job is to help those without it, not judge those who exercise theirs differently than I would. The conversation continued for 90 minutes. They discussed Afghanistan, politics, tradition, progress, and what it means to serve in an age of cynicism. But the most powerful moment came near the end. Preston asked, "What do you hope people take from this entire experience?" James thought carefully before answering. That dignity isn't loud. That service matters whether cameras are watching or not. That before we judge someone's choices, we should understand their reasons. And that standing for something, literally or figuratively, requires strength most people never see. AOC added that making mistakes publicly doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. It can be the beginning of understanding. James could have humiliated me. Instead, he educated me. That grace is rare. We should all aspire to it. The interview ended with a handshake. But more than that, a moment of mutual respect captured on camera for millions to see. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. Both conservative and progressive outlets praised it. Think pieces celebrated dialogue across difference. Social media, usually a battlefield, found rare unity and appreciation for substantive conversation. But not everyone was pleased. James's former post at the Palace Gate had become a pilgrimage site. Tourists specifically requested photos there. Some tried to provoke other guards into speaking. The palace had to issue statements asking visitors to respect the guards' duty, and there were critics. Plenty of them. Some said James had betrayed his duty by speaking at all. Others accused him of being a palace propaganda tool, using the moment to defend an outdated institution. AOC's own supporters were divided. Some appreciated her growth. Others saw it as capitulation to conservative values. The criticism found James one evening as he scrolled through social media. One comment in particular stung: "Easy to talk about choosing silence when you're a white man in a position of privilege. Try being marginalized and see how much choice you really have." The comment had 40,000 likes. James stared at it for a long time. There was truth in it. His choices were shaped by circumstances he'd been born into. Not everyone had the same options. He called AOC. She answered on the second ring. "I saw that comment too," she said before he could speak. "They're not wrong. No, they're not. But they're not entirely right either. You made your point about your specific situation. That doesn't invalidate their point about theirs." "So what do we do?" James asked. "Keep learning. Keep listening. This conversation isn't over just because we had one good interview." 2 weeks later, they arranged a town hall. Not about their viral moment, but about service, work, and dignity across different experiences. They invited veterans, service workers, activists, and regular people who'd never had a platform. The event was held at a community center in East London. No cameras except for a simple live stream. 200 people in person, thousands watching online. James listened to a single mother who worked 3 jobs talk about how silence felt for her like drowning while everyone walked past. He listened to a janitor describe being invisible in the building he kept clean. He listened to a trans activist explain how silence had been forced on them for years before finding their voice. Each story added dimension, complexity, truth that couldn't fit in viral moments. When it was James's turn to speak, he did so differently than before. "I told Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez that my silence was my choice. That's true. But I'm learning that choice itself is a privilege not everyone has. My silence comes from strength. For others, silence comes from fear. Both are valid experiences." He paused, looking around the room. "I spoke for 47 seconds and became famous. Others have spoken their truth for years and remained invisible. That says something about what our society values. And maybe that's what we need to examine." AOC nodded. "James showed me I was making assumptions about his experience. Now we're both learning to examine our assumptions about everyone's experience. It's uncomfortable. Growth usually is." A woman in the back raised her hand. "This is all very nice. But viral moments fade. What happens when the cameras leave? When people stop caring about this conversation. Then we keep having it anyway," James said. "Not for attention. For truth. The measure of real change isn't whether it's trending. It's whether it continues when no one's watching." The town hall lasted 3 hours. It was messy, emotional, challenging. People disagreed. Arguments happened. But so did understanding. Afterward, James and AOC stood outside as people filed out. "That was harder than the interview," AOC said, "'cause it was real. Not performed for cameras. Just people trying to understand each other." "Do you think it mattered?" James watched a group of attendees exchanging numbers, planning to continue the conversation. To them it did. That's enough. Over the following months, something quietly shifted in James's life. His new role at the palace involved education programs, veteran outreach, and representing the Guard at public events. He spoke often, but never as much as he listened. He started a podcast called 47 Seconds Conversations, with people about the moments that changed them. Veterans, activists, artists, teachers. Each episode explored what it means to serve, to stand for something, to find dignity in work others might not understand. AOC appeared on episode 12. They talked about growth, mistakes, and the difference between performing values and living them. "I learned something important from you," she told him during the recording. "That challenging someone doesn't require destroying them. That education can happen without humiliation. That grace is stronger than gotcha moments." "And you taught me," James replied, "that questioning tradition isn't automatically disrespectful. That some silences do need breaking. That my experience isn't universal, even when it's valid." The podcast never went massively viral. It averaged 50,000 listeners per episode. Modest by internet standards, but the emails James received told him it mattered. Teachers using episodes in classrooms, veterans finding community through the conversations, young people reconsidering what meaningful work looked like. Impact doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. 6 months after their first encounter, James stood at a veterans memorial service. A soldier he'd served with in Afghanistan had finally lost his battle with PTSD. The funeral was small, quiet, attended mostly by those who'd served alongside him. AOC showed up. James saw her slip into the back row. No cameras, no staff, just her. After the service, she approached him. "I saw the notice online. Thought you might want support. You didn't have to come." "I know, but you showed me something about service. About showing up even when no one's watching. This is me practicing." They stood together in the cemetery, two unlikely allies brought together by a moment of conflict that became a moment of growth. "Do you ever regret speaking?" AOC asked. "That day at the palace?" James thought about it, about everything that had followed. The attention, the criticism, the opportunities, the challenges. "No," he said finally, "because it reminded me why silence has power. Not to hide, but to choose. I was silent for 8 years by choice. I spoke for 47 seconds by choice. Both mattered because both were mine. And now I use both. Silence when it serves. Voice when it's needed. That's the balance I'm still learning." A year after the viral moment, James received an invitation that surprised him. The U.S. Congress was hosting a ceremony honoring service members from allied nations. AOC had personally requested he attend as her guest. He flew to Washington, D.C., his first time in America. The Capitol was overwhelming. Monuments, government buildings, history everywhere he looked. But also different from London. Younger, louder, more raw. At the ceremony, sat among decorated veterans from a dozen countries. Politicians gave speeches about sacrifice and duty, the usual platitudes, but then AOC took the podium. "A year ago I made a mistake," she began. No preamble, just honesty. "I encountered a royal guard in London and made assumptions about his service. I called him decorative, a prop. I was wrong." The room fell silent. "That guard, James Sullivan, is here tonight. And I want to tell you what he taught me. Not through anger or retaliation, but through 47 seconds of honest truth." She recounted the story, not as a viral moment, but as a lesson. About dignity. About service in all its forms. About the danger of assuming we understand someone's choices. "We talk a lot about amplifying voices," AOC continued. "But James taught me we also need to respect chosen silence. That not everyone needs saving. That sometimes our assumptions about oppression reveal our own biases more than reality." After the ceremony, James stood with a group of American veterans. They shared stories, found common ground despite different flags. Different wars, different experiences. One veteran, Miguel, a Marine who'd lost his leg in Iraq, pulled James aside. "The thing you said about silence being power? I felt that. After I got wounded, everyone wanted me to be inspiring. Share my story. Be a symbol. Sometimes I just wanted to be quiet. Process it myself. But silence wasn't allowed. Everyone needed my pain to mean something for them." "Did you find your silence?" James asked. "Eventually, by choosing when to share and when to keep things mine. Your story helped me explain that to people. So thank you." That night, James and AOC had dinner at a small restaurant away from official events. No agenda. Just to people who'd accidentally become part of each other's story. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't spoken?" AOC asked over pasta. "Sometimes. I'd probably still be standing at the gate, unknown, content. Not a bad life. But this is better?" James considered. "Different. Not better or worse, just different. I've helped some people, annoyed others, started conversations that needed starting. But I also lost the simplicity of that silence. Do you miss it? Every day. There's peace in anonymity. In standing posts and just being present without needing to explain yourself. AOC smiled. I've never had that. Been in the spotlight since my first campaign. Sometimes I see people living quiet lives and wonder what that's like. It's not better or worse than yours, James echoed his earlier words. Just different. They talked until the restaurant closed. About politics, service, the weight of public life, and the value of private moments. About how one viral incident had changed both their paths in ways neither had anticipated before they parted. AOC handed James a book. I wrote about our encounter in here. Chapter 7. I wanted you to read it before it publishes. James took the book. Should I be worried? You tell me after you read it. That night in his hotel room, James read Chapter 7. AOC had titled it, The Guard Who Taught Me to Listen. She wrote about her mistakes with unflinching honesty. About her assumptions, her privilege in assuming she knew what oppression looked like. About how James's 47 seconds had forced her to examine not just what she believed, but how she approached those beliefs. But she also wrote about grace. About how James could have humiliated her, but chose education instead. About how real growth requires people willing to correct us without destroying us. The final paragraph read, James Sullivan stood silent for 8 years, speaking for 47 seconds, and in doing so taught me a lesson no political debate ever had, that assumptions are the enemy of understanding, that service takes many forms, and that the strongest voices sometimes belong to those who speak least. He gave me a gift that did not humiliation, but the opportunity to grow. I hope I've honored it. James closed the book, eyes damp. He'd been changed by that moment, too, more than he'd admitted. The next morning, before his flight home, James returned to Arlington Cemetery. He walked among the white headstones, thousands of them, marking service and sacrifice. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter, Charlotte, who was 10 now. Dad, my teacher showed us your video in class. Everyone thinks you're cool. But I already knew that. Come home soon. Love you, James smiled. Out of everything, the fame, the opportunities, the conversations, this mattered most. His daughter seeing service as something worth choosing, worth standing for? He texted back. Home tomorrow. Love you too. And Charlotte. Remember, cool isn't about what others think. It's about knowing why you stand where you stand. 3 dots appeared. Then, that's very dad of you, but also true. 6 months later, James published his own book. Not about the viral moments specifically, but about service. About his time in Afghanistan, his years as a Royal Guard, and the lessons learned from standing still while the world rushed by. The dedication read, To everyone who serves in silence, your work matters. Your choice matters. You matter. AOC wrote the foreword. In it, she described their unlikely friendship, born from conflict, but sustained by mutual respect. James and I, she wrote, represent different worlds, different values, different approaches to service. But we've learned that difference isn't opposition. It's opportunity. Opportunity to learn, grow, and understand that there are many ways to stand for something. His way isn't mine. Mine isn't his. Both are valid. Both are needed. The book sold modestly. No bestseller lists. But letters came from around the world. From guards in Canada, Japan, Greece, all who stood silent posts and felt seen. From veterans finding peace after war, from young people choosing service over fame, James returned to his work at the palace. His role had evolved. He gave tours, spoke with school groups, trained new guards. He used his voice regularly now. Never forgot the power of silence. On the anniversary of that July afternoon, James stood again at the gate where it had all begun. Not officially, just visiting. A new guard stood at the post now, young and serious. Maintaining the tradition, James watched him for a moment, remembering that feeling. The weight of the uniform. The pride in standing still. The strength in choosing silence. A tourist approached the young guard. Phone out, Starting to speak, James gently intercepted. "Excuse me. Before you film, may I tell you about what you're seeing?" The tourist, a young woman, lowered her phone. "Oh, sure. This guard is part of a tradition spanning centuries. He's highly trained, educated, and here by choice. What you see as silence is actually strength. What looks like performance is actually service. Before you judge or mock, consider that there might be more to his story than meets the eye." "Oh, I wasn't going to mock. I just wanted a photo, and take one with respect," James smiled. "And maybe thank him silently in your mind. He won't respond, but he'll know." The woman took a respectful photo, nodded at the guard, and walked away thoughtfully. The young guard's eye flickered toward James for just a second. Not breaking protocol, just acknowledging. One guard to another, James walked away, leaving him to his duty. Asterisk. That evening, James's podcast released its 50th episode, a milestone. The guest was a teacher from Detroit who'd served 20 years in underfunded schools, choosing to stay when others left. "Why do you stay?" James asked her. "Because the kids need consistency. Because someone has to stand with them. Because service isn't about glory. It's about showing up day after day, even when no one notices." "That sounds like a kind of silent duty," James observed. "It is. But silence doesn't mean invisible. Those kids see me. That's enough." After the recording, James sat in his studio, thinking about that July afternoon 1 year ago. How 47 seconds had expanded into a lifetime of conversations. He'd learned that his silence had power, but so did his voice. That choosing when to use each was an art form. That judgment was easy, understanding was hard, and grace was hardest of all. Most importantly, he'd learned that viral moments fade, but the lessons they teach can echo far beyond the original noise. His phone showed the video still circulating online. 127 million views now. Countless comments, shares, debates. But what mattered more were the quiet messages. The veteran who found purpose again. The teenager who chose service over cynicism. The teacher who felt seen. The single mother who found her voice. The countless people who learned that dignity comes in many forms. James closed his laptop and looked out at London's evening lights. Somewhere, guards still stood at their posts. Silent, strong, chosen. Somewhere, activists still fought for voices that needed amplifying. Somewhere, people were learning that service takes many forms, and all of them matter. And somewhere, in the space between silence and voice, between tradition and progress, between conflict and understanding, real change was happening. One conversation at a time. One moment of grace at a time. One choice to listen at a time. The guard who spoke for 47 seconds had learned to use both his silence and his voice with purpose. And in teaching others that lesson, he'd found his own answer to the question everyone asks. What matters most? Not the volume of your voice, not the length of your silence, but knowing why you choose either one, and standing firm in that choice, whatever it may be.